She's a freelance broadcaster working for the likes of BBC Sport Wales, S4C and Sport Wales. Here's episode 6 of Rich's Sport Media Show with Sioned Dafydd. Sioned,
Hi, Reg.
how are you?
I'm good, all good, all good.
So, you're working for the likes of BBC, S4C and Sport Wales as a freelance sports broadcaster. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yeah, so I've been, like you said, freelance sports broadcaster. I've been doing it full-time for about 2 years now. I graduated from the Sports Broadcast Masters course at Cardiff Met. I graduated in 2019. Did various bits of work whilst studying, but since graduating, that's pretty much been my full-time job. So like you alluded to, I have various clients, really, is the way I'd like to put it. My main ones at the moment, obviously being freelance, it does change, but my main ones are BBC Sport Wales, S4C. I do various bits for Sport Wales. When I say S4C, there's different production companies that feed into S4C's coverage. So Rondo Media, they do Scorio, so I work a lot for them. It's a company called Media Atom, an independent production company that does a lot of S4C's European rugby coverage. I work for them as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Because I'm so early on in my career, I don't tend to have any big dramatic stories of how I got to where I am just yet. It's still very much early days, but I really, really love it.
And you've done so much early on as well. But let's go back to the start. When did your interest in sports specifically come?
Yeah, this is a good question, and it's one I never really know how to answer, because I was, do you know when you're like in school, you're a teenager, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really didn't. I loved school. I loved, I worked hard. I got good grades and everything, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do as a job. I had friends that knew I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, but that just wasn't me at all. I've always been a massive football fan. I can blame my family for that. We're a long line of Swansea City fans has kind of gone back for generations. So I think my dad took me to the Vetch to see my first game when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And that stuck with me ever since. So sport was always a part of my life. So I think it just kind of, subconsciously turned into something that I remember when I was about 17 or 18 thinking, okay, well, I like watching football, I like talking about football, can I try and get paid to do that, basically? So yeah, that's my father as well, he worked in the industry, so that probably rubbed off on me as well, sort of without knowing. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
And you mentioned school there as well. In school, did you do much around sport media itself, or did that sort of come afterwards?
It came afterwards. I remember, not so much in school. When I left sixth form that summer, so I was 17 going on 18, when I left, I did a week's work experience with the Evening Post in their sports department. I think I did. They either ran a competition or I saw it on Twitter. I can't really remember, but anyway, I did a week with them and loved it. And that's how I got to go to my first press conference at Swansea City. And that was fantastic. I was just so excited to be going. I remember waking up in the morning, I was like, oh, I'd watched like every press conference on YouTube every week for as long as I can remember. So the fact that I was actually going to it, I was really, really excited. So yeah, that week really had a big impact on me. And when I went to that press conference, then there were two women then. You had Fran Donovan, who I know you've had on the podcast. She was there for Premier League Productions, and Kerry Barnett was with Fran, sort of as a producer. And I remember that day they were the only two women in the press conference, and being a young woman, I naturally gravitated towards them, went over and said hello, and fair play to the both of them. They were amazing. And then Kerry invited me back to the press conference the following week to see how the TV side of things worked, because with the Evening Post, obviously I was with the written press, with Gareth Vincent, who I ended up working with at the club, which was cool. So yeah, fair play to Fran and Kerry, who were just lovely to me. And that summer then, I pretty much went back every week just with Kerry and Fran. Didn't do anything. All I did was sit there and sort of shadow them, and shadowed Fran and saw how she went about her interview process and everything. So yeah, it was that summer after I left sixth form that I really started to get the ball rolling in terms of wanting to get as much experience as I could.
And in that first press conference, quite interesting. Did you get to ask any questions, or were you there sort of shadowing?
I was there shadowing, didn't get to ask any questions. It was Gary Monk was in charge of the Swans at that time. So yeah, no questions, but I went. You have the press conference that you see on TV where the manager sits behind the board and everyone asks the questions, but that's the TV side of things. Afterwards, well, obviously not at the moment with COVID, but what typically happens is afterwards then the manager will go into a separate room with the journalists from the newspapers, and then they'll have sort of a roundtable discussion then that the journalists can use for the newspapers. So yeah, no questions. I just sat there very quiet and probably really shy as well.
And that was before you went to university then?
Yes, so that was, like I mentioned, this just literally the summer before. So this would have been, well, it was the first press conference of the season, so early August, and I was going to university in the September then. So yeah, I wasn't even going to university to do media. I went to study Welsh in Bangor University. So I think in the back of my mind as well, I thought, well, I might as well, because my degree isn't anything to do with sports media, then outside of that, I should really try and volunteer, get work experience and all that good stuff.
What was that like, trying to balance your degree and also gain work experience as well?
Yeah, it was tough at times. When I was at university, Bangor isn't far from Carnarvon, and that Rondo, who produce Sgorio for S4C, have offices in Carnarvon as well. And I got like a Sunday job with them. They had a Sunday afternoon sports show called Club, and I would go in every Sunday morning. It was a really early start. I think I had to be there by like 7:30. And I just worked as a researcher, as a sort of assistant. I got paid, like it was paid work, which was fab. But that could be tough at times because obviously all my mates would go out on the Saturday night, but I was very aware of the fact that I had to be up at 6:30. So I think I probably did turn up with a couple of hangovers, which I absolutely do not recommend anyone does. But most of the time I was probably a bit boring. My friends are a bit like, oh gosh. So yeah, that could be tough, but to be fair, I'm actually really glad I did that, because to anyone listening who wants to get into the industry, like, be prepared to say goodbye to your social life pretty much, because you work on weekends. There's a lot of late nights, a lot of traveling involved. So that sort of set the standard for me. When I was 18, 19, I sort of knew, well, this is the kind of sacrifices that I'll have to make going forward, which is absolutely fine. It's the positives definitely outweigh the negatives when you work in this industry. And then going back to your question, then every summer I'd get in touch with Swansea City, because I'd be home in Swansea, and just ask, can I come along? Can I do this? And that's something I would absolutely encourage anyone who's starting off to do. Just try and get as much experience as you can, and chances are, like, you won't get paid to do it. It's you've got to do it off your own back, but I guarantee you, like, it will pay off, because you never know what doors will open and what it could lead to.
Exactly, because you can't just walk into paid work usually without any experience. You need to have something to show as well. And I noticed you've got a show reel as well, an impressive show reel from everything you've really done. How important do you think it is to have something like that, a visual portfolio, essentially, to show potential employers?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think it is important, especially if you do want to go into reporting, commentating, presenting. It is important to have something that's easily available, easily accessible, that you can just email to people really quickly, or you can put up on YouTube or on your LinkedIn. Is really important. Or on the other side of things, if you want to be a cameraman or an editor, that again, you have a 2 to 3 minute show reel where you can easily send it out to people. Because I'm a firm believer in, you can talk a good talk and you can sell yourself, and you can sound as impressive as you can. But personally, if not that I ever have hired anyone, but I can imagine if I was to hire someone, I'd think, well, let me see what you've done then. Let me, show me the proof of the pudding, if you like. And going back, to the show reel, it's something every season at the start of every new season, I'll update it. I'll make a new one. It's important that things are up to date. I feel so. I'll spend a couple of days over the summer now just collecting all the footage that I've done from this season so that it's ready to go for the next season.
And then in your undergraduate degree as well, in Welsh, you mentioned you obviously got a load of experience in the sport media industry. Did that sort of make you want to go on and do the MSc Sport Broadcast course that obviously you mentioned earlier you completed?
Yeah, that's a funny one. So a bit like when I was in school, when I was nearing the end of my time at university, still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a clear image in my head. And then it was in my final year, because of course I was on the first year of the sports broadcast course, so it didn't exist prior to that. But in my final year, I think it was around Christmas time before I finished my undergrad degree, I sort of heard through various people, oh, there's this new course starting. Joe Towns, who I knew who he was because he worked at the BBC, and I knew people who knew him. They said that he's setting up this new course. But it was funny because I was just done with uni by that point. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to do another exam. I don't want to write another essay. I don't think I could sit in another lecture. I was just, I was done. And then had a chat with Joe, and by the end, it was a no-brainer decision for me, really. And hands down, I've said that I am the course's biggest cheerleader. I've said this so many times, but it's, hands down one of the best decisions that I could have made at that point, because it gives you the perfect or it is the perfect stepping stone into the industry. It's the skills you've learned are just invaluable. The staff, the people, the university as a whole, they're so supportive of you, and it's, to me, it was the perfect decision.
I completely agree. It's an incredible course. And on the course as well, what sort of experiences did you get?
Oh my gosh, so many. The one that sticks out is for my placement. I actually got to go to Australia, to the Gold Coast, to the Commonwealth Games, and worked out there. It's quite a funny story because they were. It was unpaid. It was all voluntary, but obviously all expenses paid for, and all that good stuff. And Joe Towns approached me and said, oh, there's this voluntary role going. They need a Welsh speaker. I think you'd be perfect for it. But it just felt so out of my comfort zone because I knew nothing about the sport, or, I didn't feel like I knew enough to go and work out there. I didn't know anything about squash or swimming or boxing. Well, boxing, kind of did, but table tennis, another one. And I just kind of put it off, and I thought, oh, no, it's not for me. And then luckily Joe Towns told me to get a grip, and he was like, look, this will be amazing. You have to go and do it. And again, so glad I did. I had to go through an interview process and everything. But spent, I think 3 weeks to a month just out in the Gold Coast it was intense. It was, oh gosh, long, I'm talking like 16-hour days, not a lot of sleep, like a lot of jet lag, but just I think I slept for about a week after I came back from Australia. But that's definitely the one that sticks out, and it's that thing that to me like stands out on my CV. So just that's, I mean, the course as a whole, just day to day, it's an incredible experience. But if you're asking me for like one that sticks with me, then it has to be that one.
That certainly sounds absolutely amazing. Incredible experience. And for those sports that you maybe didn't know too much about, when you obviously work with them, you need to end up knowing about them. How much preparation did you have to do to sort of learn the sports?
So it worked out quite well actually, because I definitely learned as I went on, because you were so immersed in the tournament, and you were so immersed, we were in the athletes village, so that's where we stayed as well. So you've just got these like world famous athletes around you all the time. You're watching them training. I remember my bedroom looked over the rugby pitch where the sevens rugby players were training, so that was great to wake up to every morning. I could keep an eye and see how Wales are getting on. You were just so fully immersed, so there wasn't that much prep, because I really did just have to learn on the job. And you'll find in this industry that is the case a lot of the times. You can do all the prep in the world if you like, but it's not until you're actually there in that situation, where I find that you get the most valuable experiences and knowledge. I'm a big fan of sort of learning on the job, if you know what I mean, because I think that's the best way to go about and do things.
You like being under pressure then?
Yeah, I do. My boyfriend always laughs at me because he's like, "You're the most stressed out person I know," but like you somehow just like when you're on air or you do stuff like he describes me as like a swan. I'm calm on the top, and then my little legs are going underneath me, which is definitely true. But I think you need a bit of pressure, and to me, there's nothing like, if you want an example, when you're working on a live OB, and I'm working with Scorio at the moment as their pitch side reporter, and you've got the director, producers, like in your year, things are going wrong. It's a lot of, and it's a lot to take in, and you're there, you're on camera, you're asking your questions, everything's going off in your year, but you're the one that's got to just act calm and act like there's nothing going on, because obviously the people watching have no idea of what's going on in your year. So I think, but I love it. I love the buzz. I love the adrenaline that it gives you. And so I think pressure is good, and knowing how to act under pressure, and knowing how to conduct yourself under pressure, because it's this industry, it can be stressful, and it is very, very intense, and things will often go wrong. So if you can keep cool, calm and collected, then you'll be all right.
Is there a certain way that you work under pressure? Do you have any strategy or techniques to help? Or is it completely natural?
Oh, good question. I've never been asked that question before. It's not so much a coping mechanism, but one thing I'm always conscious of is, and something I'd really encourage, people starting out to remember, is just always be someone people want to work with, and always be nice. Always remember your manners. Always say please and thank you. And this might sound really, really basic, but like you mentioned, in those highly pressured situations, people will snap. People are tired. People will be stressed, and it doesn't matter how stressful a situation gets, and it doesn't matter how many things are going wrong, always be a nice person, if that makes sense. And an example, if I've done a game on a Saturday and things went wrong or whatever, say on the Sunday morning, I'll always try and just drop the producer or director a text, just to say thank you, just to touch base. So in terms of, that's one piece of advice I'd probably give is, doesn't matter how stressful things get, and trust me, they will get stressful. Like someone will snap at you, someone will shout at you. It's just inevitable. But try not to take it personally, and just always think, right, just be nice, be a kind person.
And that Australia trip, going back to that, you're obviously a Welsh speaker, and that's one of the reasons why you got that. How important do you think it is for people sort of to learn their native language?
Yeah, massively. And this is something that personally for me is really important. I grew up in a Welsh speaking family, so I've always done everything through Welsh, really. And because of that, being able to speak Welsh has just opened so many doors for me. But it's not just Welsh, it's any language in the world. If you speak more than one language, then naturally you'll get more opportunities. One of my regrets is in school not doing foreign languages, because I know some people in this industry who speak like 4 different languages, and I just think that is incredible. I look at I think an example, Rashmin Chowdhury is a presenter that I really, really look up to. I think she's fantastic. She does a lot of stuff. She's worked for everyone, but she's mainly on Talk Sports at the moment. She presented the FIFA Best Awards, and she speaks English, Spanish, French. Like, she can, and there she was presenting this award ceremony, just switching languages like that. And it is something I'm really passionate about. My lockdown goal was to start learning Spanish, but that's not going too well at the moment. But it's definitely, learning a third language is definitely on my list, because I'd honestly, especially if anyone's listening to this and you're still in school, maybe you're choosing your GCSEs or something, like, do a language, because it's just the places it could take you. Like, I have a pipe dream. I love La Liga. I love Spanish football. I would love to be able to go and work, out there one day, or to just, do interviews in Spanish or something. It would be incredible. So that's something that I'm really, trying to work on. But going back to the Welsh, I feel very, very fortunate that I can speak Welsh. That's why I have been able to do stuff for Scorio. I was able to go out to the Commonwealth Games. And as well, you find as the years go on, budgets are much, much smaller. So for example, I'll report on from games for BBC Radio Wales and Radio Cymru. And a lot of the times I will do Welsh and English on the same night in one game. So if I'm doing Newport against Colchester, for example, and there's been a goal, the producer from Radio Cymru will come to me and in Welsh say, okay, we'll come to you next for an update. Cool. And then I'll do it in Welsh, and then they switch it in my ear, and then I'll have the producer from Radio Wales saying, okay, same again in English, please, Sioned. So, which is hard work. Again, going back to highly pressured situations, you've got to be on it on nights like those. But, why would the BBC pay 2 people when they can just pay 1? So there's definitely the financial reasons behind it as well. So yeah, I'm really, really passionate about that, as you can hear. I could go on and on.
What's that like, having to swap in between English and Welsh all the time? Because it's hard enough trying to think about what you're going to say in one language, never mind 2.
Yeah, that's a good question. And people do ask me that, not just in work, but just in life. How can I switch from Welsh to English so easily? The honest answer is, Rich, I don't know. It's just my brain. I think when since you were a newborn, had 2 languages around you, you don't really think about it. It can be, it's like you said, it's thinking, as soon as I know what I'm going to say, it's fine. I can easily, translate on the spot then. So it's the planning and thinking of what to say that is definitely the most difficult part in that situation, because as well, it happens so quickly. If there's a goal, the producer will be in my ear within, a second or 2, say, okay, we're coming to you next. So yeah, it's fun though. It's all fun and games.
And you've obviously had loads of opportunities as well, lots of experience despite being so early on in your career as well. That obviously comes down to quite a lot of networking. You must be good at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like you mentioned, I'm really, really glad that when I was 17, 18, that I had that work ethic in me to, go out there and try and get as much work and as much work experience as I could. It all started with seeing that tweet about a week of work experience with the sports department in the Evening Post, and then that kind of, I don't know, lit something up inside me then. And then, I had the courage to go over to Fran and Kerry and say hello to them. And as that went on, and I'd go back to the press conferences at Swansea every week, I then got to know the club's media staff. So people like Jonathan Wilshire, Chris Barney, Ben Donovan, they'd see me every week basically, and I'd slowly, get to know them. And then should probably say I then went on to work for the club then as soon as I left Cardiff Met, went to ended up presenting like Swansea's match day coverage, which was mad. And that all, had I not been so driven and so prepared to go to those press conferences every week and get to know everyone, and that might not have ever happened, if you know what I mean. And then just to follow up on the Swansea stuff, whilst I was studying for my masters, I did stuff for their women's team, all unpaid. I'd go every Sunday to Sioned Dafydd. I'd climb up the rickety old gantry and film the game, in the wind and the rain, and I do post-match interviews and everything. And I wasn't paid for any of that, but I knew, I was happy to sacrifice my Sunday afternoon to go and do that work, and it definitely did pay off in the end. So yeah, networking is important. Going back to what I was saying about being a nice person, I think just being approachable and willing to put in the time to speak to people and get to know people, is definitely invaluable.
It's just throwing yourself in as many uncomfortable situations as possible, really.
Oh, definitely. I love that quote. Nothing good ever comes from comfort zones, and I love that. I think it's, if you're someone that's willing to go the extra mile, if you're someone that's willing to go out of their way and work hard, then it will definitely pay off in the long run. It might take a while. Gosh, I remember there were times at Swansea where the last thing I wanted to do was go out and film in the rain on a Sunday afternoon, or go and film the women's team training on Tuesday night when, I don't know, I had other things to do, or other things that I could have done. But looking back, had I not done those things, then who knows what could have happened.
You mentioned filming there as well on the sport broadcast course. That's obviously the main sort of thing, production. I'm sure you had to make a documentary while on that course as well. What did you make that on?
Oh yeah, but my documentary wasn't very good. That was I did. So I did it based on the Commonwealth Games because I just had so much footage from my time out there. But I think in my feedback it said it was more like what did the feedback say? It was more like a highlights show rather than a documentary, which was absolutely fair enough. I think at that point I'd started working for the Swans, so trying to juggle that with creating that documentary was tough. So yeah, that was. Don't ask me for advice on how to make a documentary, because Joe Towns will tell you there's probably better former students to ask about that.
And when reporting as well, you've presented from a studio, you've presented pitch side, reported pitch side. Is it much different being in a studio and working compared to being outside and working?
It's warmer. It's definitely warmer. Yes, there is a difference. Bearing in mind, the studio we had at Swansea, even though it was fantastic, it was nowhere near the proper TV studios that you get. For example, I didn't have talkback or anything. If something was coming up next, I had one of the video guys write on a piece of paper and show it to me. It was pretty old school. In terms of, that's a good question. I've never actually thought of the difference. When you're in a studio, I have to think about this. I'm not actually sure. I guess one of the differences is that when you're pitch side, you're more often than not, you'll be interviewing managers or players straight after the game. So that, to me, I find pitch side actually to be a bit more stressful than being in a studio, because you're there. You might have your producer or director in your year. For example, with Scordio now, the floor manager will chase after one of the managers, and because you've only got a certain amount of time to fill before you're off air, so you have to make sure they get there quickly. And just to note, floor managers, amazing people. I don't know how they do it. It's just such an important job in the industry. And yeah, massive shout out to any floor manager out there, because it's, yeah, you're all amazing. So when you're pitch side, you're conscious of, you have to think on your feet. You have to think, right, what questions am I going to ask, blah blah blah. Whereas in a studio, I found I had a bit more time. It was a lot more of a relaxed vibe, because you tend to be in a bit of a bubble. Probably helped at my time with Swansea that we didn't have talk back, so there I was, I'd just be typing my notes and happy days. So yeah, good question though. I've never actually been asked that before, so I'm not sure if I answered that in a very good way, but yeah.
Yeah, it was answered very well. That's a couple now you've never had before. And when interviewing players and coaches and the things like that, they're obviously all different personalities. Do you just see them as another human being?
Yes, and that's something that I try and do. I try and sounds a bit cliche. I try not to make it feel like an interview, if you know what I mean. And I always try and make sure that I'm relaxed, that they're relaxed. I like to make, small talk and, just, yeah, I don't ever want to go in there and be like, I don't know, Jeremy Paxton and be, and feel like they're being interrogated or anything. So yeah, that is something that's important to me, because you're spot on when you say, they're only human at the end of the day. And I've been lucky in, through people that I know, I've spent time with players and managers in a really, outside of work, in a social setting or whatever. And because I've been able to have those experiences and I've seen them on the other side, like, oh gosh, yeah, they're just people. One of those experiences was when I was with Swansea and I went out on their pre-season tour. I think it was 2018. We went to Austria. And because you're with players every single day, you're eating food with them, you're on the flight with them, you're seeing them around the hotel. And you just realize, oh gosh, that they're just people. Obviously very accomplished people, and gosh, it's, for me, that's my favorite part of the job, is being able to sit down with them and chat. But yeah, hopefully they feel like when I'm interviewing them that they're enjoying it, that I'm enjoying it, and it's just like chilled out vibes.
Yeah, I prefer to call interviews chats as well. And I noticed you've got a show called Chats with Sioned as well, with a lot of, well, more personalities. I guess, what was the thinking behind setting up that show?
Yeah, so well, it's kind of died a bit of a death now. It was definitely a lockdown project, because when the pandemic hit, touched on the fact that I'm freelance, so lost all of my work overnight. Not fun. That was not a fun time at all. And because of that, lost all of my presenting work. Everything. Obviously, sport came to a halt. Well, everything did. So I thought, well, if I'm not going to have any work, I at least want something to show for it at the end. I'm not going to sit on my bum and do nothing, for however many months this is going to go on for, when it's gone on for a year. So so I decided, right, so I started just in my bedroom. I thought, right, I'll interview, players, some of my favorite people. And yeah, it was, I actually really, really enjoyed it. It gave me a focus. It gave me something to fill my days with. And it actually went down really, really well. I had a few nice messages saying that, they really enjoyed it. So we interviewed people like Lee Trundle, had Ollie McBurney on there, which was cool. Brett Johns was another one. Andre Orlandi, who used to play for the Swans. Tash Harding was another one. And yeah, a lot of people. There was a lot of hard work when it went into that. So yeah, it wasn't anything that I foresaw as something that would last forever. It literally was something to keep me busy in lockdown and to just remind people that I'm still around.
That must have been great for practice as well, because you're obviously a presenter, and if you're out of practice, you're not going to go back as well.
Definitely. And going back to making connections and stuff, I actually made so many new connections through that. For example, Andrea Orlandi, I'd never met him before. We happened to follow each other on Instagram, and I sent him a message and he was like, absolutely, I'd love to. And then we've sort of kept in touch after that, which is great. So it's, yeah, that was fantastic for networking. And yeah, like you said, going back to getting practice, I think I was recording one a week pretty much. And I'd also have to edit it and do all that good stuff as well. So yeah, it was really fun, to be fair. Looking back, it was yeah, really good decision and had a lot of fun.
And then have you been back at it for a bit of time now, back getting work again?
Yeah, so things are really picking up, which is really, really good. I'm trying to think. Well, over the summer, so I think I started with them in May 2020, so the pandemic's still very much going on. Started with Sport Wales. I did a 6-month contract with them, not doing any presenting or anything, literally just working with their communications team, which bit left field, not something that I saw happening. It was, the harsh reality was, well, I needed some money, had bills and stuff to pay. But also it was a fantastic opportunity to do something completely different. And another piece of advice I'd give, don't just pigeonhole yourself into doing one thing. I think you have to have so many different skills. Gosh, what did I do? There was stuff like I had to work. They had a Be Active Wales campaign where grassroots clubs across Wales could apply for funding to help them get through the pandemic and stuff. So helping on the campaign for that, I'd help sort out the adverts that would be put in newspapers and stuff for that campaign. Which again, something completely different, something I'd never done before. So gained some really, really good experience, and working for a governing body, again, something that just looks great on the CV. So I did that over the summer. And then there was a new new rugby program commissioned for S4C called T Rugby, which is the rugby house. So again, no presenting or anything. I worked as a researcher on that as a part of the production team. Which again, like I've said, I try not to be a one-trick pony. I try and get as much experience doing as many different roles as I can. So spent a good few months working on that. And now I've started with Scorio full-time for Nikki John, the wonderful Nikki John, who's usually their pitchside reporter. She's gone off to have a baby, and they've trusted me to fill in for her for the next few months. So yeah, it's going to be busy, but I'm not complaining at all, because it sounds a bit cliche, but most of the time it doesn't even feel like work. So yeah, no complaints at all.
Yeah, it's great to be busy, especially during these times as well. When you weren't working, did you do anything else other than like the chats with Sioned? Did you do anything to help, I guess?
No, probably the chats with Sioned was the main thing. A part of me was a bit like, oh, do you know what? If we're going to be forced to do nothing, then you might as well try and enjoy it if you can. I read a lot. Oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever read so many books in my life. I think I read every single kind of sports book or autobiography that there is. I remember my mum turning to me once. I think I read every book on Pep Guardiola. And my mum turned to me, she was like, "You've read so many books on that man. I feel like he's a part of the family by now." So I spent the time to, sort of increase my knowledge, and, sat there reading, me and my boyfriend watched a lot of documentaries as well. I had a bit of a chill, but, I was conscious, well, anything I read or anything I watch, I kind of wanted to educate me in some shape or form. I mentioned the Spanish. I started on the Spanish, but then didn't really carry on. I need to pick that up again. But yeah, I took it more as an opportunity to just, have a bit of a chill and think, well, it's out of this entire situation is out of everyone's control. So there's no point stressing or getting worked up about it, because there's absolutely nothing you can do.
And I suppose linked to that as well, do you do anything to take your mind away from work when you are busy?
That's a really good question. And yes, I think it's really important, especially in this day and age, because we're all on our phones like 24/7. we're all consuming content 24/7, even if we don't think we are. Do you know what I mean? It is difficult to switch off. For example, podcasts. I remember, if Joe Towns is listening to this, he might completely disagree, but I remember on the course they told us, you have to listen to like all the podcasts, watch all the documentaries. If you're in the car, like put 5 Live on, put Talk Sport on. You have to just constantly be, like a sponge and take everything in, which is absolutely true, to a certain extent. But oh my gosh, sometimes, if I've been working on a football game, the last thing I want to do is get in the car and listen to a game of football on the radio. So I try and I listen to audiobooks that have nothing to do with sport, just to switch off, or listen to podcasts that have nothing to do with sport, because sometimes I feel it can get a bit sport heavy, especially if, I'm someone, watching football, for example, was my hobby. It was my main hobby. It was, the main thing that took up my spare time when I was younger. So now that I'm working in sport as well, it can be quite overwhelming if you work in sport plus your hobby is watching and reading about sport. I think it is healthy that people do switch off and just read about other things, and because otherwise my brain can get a bit frazzled at times.
And you mentioned as well watching a lot of documentaries over lockdown, and on that sport broadcast course as well, Joe encourages everyone to watch loads of documentaries, pick up different tips and tricks. Obviously, filming and editing, you said, isn't your number one thing. That's more broadcasting. But when you watch a documentary, do you sort of watch it just for entertainment, or do you have a look at what you could do maybe if you did have to make something similar?
Yeah, good point. I think I do watch it obviously just for enjoyment, because I'm always interested in the subject or anything like that. It is funny because once and I'm sure you feel the same, once you've learned about what goes into making documentaries or what goes into making a program, you view things in a different way. For example, if I'm watching a football, if I'm watching, I don't know, Arsenal, Man United on Sky Sports on my Sunday afternoon off, I'm sat there obviously watching the game, enjoying the game, but then in my mind I'm like, okay, the director is now going, okay, camera 3, camera 2, okay, coming to you next, camera 6, or if Laura Woods is there asking questions, I know, okay, she's got a producer like shouting in her ear now, so that is interesting, and I just kind of do it naturally now. So yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about potentially wanting to work in the likes of La Liga or something in the future. You're very early on in your career. Do you have many aims for the future?
I do, to be fair. I think commentary is like the one that scares me the most, but that I've started sort of on that journey, which just makes me laugh so much. Like I can't tell you how stressed and how nervous I get before, because I mentioned the work that I do for Radio Cymru and Radio Wales. Even though you're doing updates from the game, so I'm sure anyone listening knows what I mean when you've got the main game that they're commentating on, and then they'll go, oh, there's been a goal at Rodney Parade, Sioned Dafydd, what's the latest? And then they give the updates. That's what I do. But for the archive, the BBC will want commentary on goals or any key moments. So they call it stop-start commentary, when I'll just sit there and, if Newport are attacking or there's been a penalty, then I'll commentate on that. It's very early days. Oh my gosh, no, I have so much respect for commentators because they make it sound so easy, and honestly it's probably the hardest thing that I've had to learn how to do, or the hardest thing that I've had to get my head around. But going back to when we were talking about the Welsh language, I might be completely wrong, but I don't think there's been a female Welsh speaking football commentator. Obviously you've got co-commentators like Gwennan Harris and Kath Morgan and everything, and they're just absolutely fantastic at what they do. But in terms of the main commentator. I might be wrong, but I don't think there has. So if I could get that under my belt and have that as a skill, it's going to take a while. It's going to take like a good few years of work. But I'd love to do a live game. I'd love to commentate like on a Swans game for Radio Cymru. That would just be really, really cool. So yeah, there's lots of little goals and stuff that I have, but that's probably the main one. Another one would be to go and work out at a major tournament like the Euros or the World Cup. I love one of my favorite things about this job is the fact that you do get to travel. Obviously not at the moment with the pandemic, but usually if you're lucky, there is a lot of traveling involved. So yeah, working at a World Cup or something would be cool as well.
I find that point about commentary quite interesting because you've obviously reported and presented and interviewed people and everything, and people who don't really know much about sport broadcasting may think they're all the same sort of thing, but they're obviously completely different. And then with and then with commentary as well, like even radio commentary compared to TV commentary, completely different again.
Absolutely. And I think radio commentary is much, much harder because obviously the listeners can't see what's happening on the pitch. So you literally have to be their eyes and ears and you have to go into so much detail. But that's where the skill is being detailed, but not, cramming in too much and saying too many words and, just going back. I have, just mad respect for commentators because in my head, I'll be sitting there watching a game and I know exactly what's happening. Like I can see what's happening in front of me, but it's getting all of that information out there in an eloquent way, in a way that sounds good is actually really, really hard. I'm lucky because with the stop-start commentary, I can go back and redo some things. So, if there's been a goal and, I do it all the time. Like you might get the wrong goal scorer or something, or if there's been a scramble in the penalty area and you haven't seen who scored it or anything, or luckily I can go back and redo it, which is fine. But you can't do that if you're doing it live on TV or on the radio. So just if there are any commentators listening, mad respect for all of you because it's really hard.
They're incredible, but practice makes perfect at the end of the day.
Exactly. And it's one of those jobs that the only way you'll learn how to do it, the only way you'll get better is just by doing it. You can't really, I guess you could practice in your house if you wanted to, but you'll never be able to recreate that environment of being at a live game, everything happening in real time in front of you. But I'm enjoying it much more than I thought I did because enjoying it more than I thought I would because I remember when the BBC asked me, can you start doing stop-start commentary? I thought, oh God, please no, I really don't want to do this. But yeah, I am enjoying it.
And then you mentioned traveling as well. Obviously, you went to Australia, but have you done any other traveling with the job?
I've done bits and bobs. We did a shoot with James Lawrence, who the Wales defender at the time he was at Anderlecht out in Belgium. So we travelled out there. We spent 3 days in Belgium, in Brussels, which was just so much fun. Got to spend a lot of time with James and at the club, and we drove out there. That was really fun. I love that. That's the first and so far the only sort of feature that I've gone abroad to shoot. And I just remember at the time thinking, oh, if I can do this more often in terms of going abroad to interview people, it's because I love traveling anyway. I think, we mentioned things we do in our spare time and hobbies. Since I was small, I've been lucky, as a family, my mum's always been keen for me and my sister, to see as much of the world as we can. So that's another massive passion of mine. So if I could combine, the two, then that really is the dream scenario.
That interview with James Lawrence sounds really interesting. I think it's included in your show reel as well. How did that come about?
I can't take any credit for that. That was all behind the scenes. The guys at Scoria, Arwen, one of the producers, had a contact at Anderlecht it was the kit man actually that he knew, and yeah, it just so happened that James was out there playing at the time, and we just made it happen. Really, it's funny how a lot of these things just they do happen when there is a connection, or somebody knows someone and everything. But it never ceases to amaze me how quickly things happen. And another thing, going back to, I think I mentioned the antisocial hours and everything that comes with a part of this job. You also have to be prepared to drop everything suddenly, because you might get a call and say, "Are you free tomorrow? We've got an interview with, I don't know, someone, Joe Allen, for example, up in Stoke. Right, we need you there." That happens a lot of the time. It's literally happened to me today. I've had a phone call saying you need to be in Cardiff at 11 o'clock tomorrow. It's like, cool. You have to sort of, you might think, oh, lovely, I've got a day off. But yeah, it doesn't, things do move very, very quickly in this industry. But that's what makes it, for me, really, really fun. Because no 2 days are the same.
Yeah, if you're someone that likes a schedule, the industry's not for you at all.
And I love a schedule. Anyone who knows me, I'm like classic type A personality. I love a calendar. But honestly, I go through so much Tipex because I've just got to like cross everything out and rearrange everything. So it's definitely not a 9 to 5.
But it must be extremely exciting when you do get a message like, "Oh, can you come to Cardiff, or can you go to Stoke, or can you go to Belgium?"
Yeah, it definitely is. And like I alluded to, it's for me, the interviewing, the meeting people is, for me, one of the best things, really, one of the best parts of the job. And especially, nothing will beat that feeling of when you're about to interview one of your favorite players or someone that you grew up admiring, and you just wake up in the morning with butterflies in your stomach, and you're really, really excited. And obviously, you're fully professional, you can never turn into like a crazy fangirl, and you always have to conduct yourself in a professional manner. But I just love it. To me, it's, yeah, hands down one of the best parts.
And as you mentioned, pitchside reporter for Scorio at the minute. Obviously, no fans in stadiums. Is it weird working in that environment?
Yeah, it is. Luckily, because I've done a good few games for the BBC, before doing Scorio. So I started, because I left Swansea and all of a sudden my Saturdays were free, so got in touch with the BBC. So from September onwards, pretty much every Saturday or every Tuesday night, I've been doing games for the BBC. So I'm used to it by now. I'm used to being in an empty ground. With the grounds in the Welsh League, because they're very small grounds, you probably don't notice it as much. But then when you go to somewhere like Rodney Parade, or just the other day I was at the Cardiff City Stadium, and that's weird. Like, yeah, just being there watching a game of football go on, and like the place was completely empty. It is bizarre, and it is sad. And speaking to players, they get on with it, but I know they find it really, really weird as well. It's interesting though, because you actually get to hear everything that's going on. So I actually quite like being able to hear what Mike Flynn is saying, or kind of getting that insight that you never usually do. But yeah, it is weird, and hopefully fans can return in the near future.
It'll certainly be brilliant when they do return as well, because they almost give you a little bit of energy. I'm sure you, as a when presenting pitch side and things like that, it must give you a little bit of extra energy.
Definitely, because there's always a buzz around the place. Nothing beats that match day feeling. Going back to the commentary, actually, I think another thing that's really difficult at the moment is the place is so quiet. So because I'm so new to commentary and I'm so self-conscious, and it's classic imposter syndrome in terms of, oh, I'm sat there thinking, oh, people might be thinking, oh, like, what the hell is she saying? Or she doesn't know what she's on about. If there was a stadium full of fans and constantly making noise, I probably wouldn't feel like that, and I'd feel a lot more confident. But because I'm sat there in a press box, I'm usually like 95% of the time I'm the only woman there. So when you're sat there with like very fabulous and experienced, broadcasters around you, and I'm just sat there talking into my microphone, I get really nervous because I'm scared I'm just going to sound ridiculous. So that's another thing. Like, if you're a commentator, you're very conscious that everyone can hear what you're saying.
And you mentioned there about sometimes you're the only woman there. Does that bother you at all, or does it not impact?
Honest, yeah. To be honest, no. It's a subject that gets a lot of attention, and rightly so. I will always be an advocate, for women, and we definitely need more women in the industry. But I have to say, from personal experience, I've never been made to feel uncomfortable or unwanted. I think it's more in my brain more than anything. I've got some fantastic male colleagues who have always been so supportive of me. Fantastic producers that I've worked with, and not just producers, like people from all over the industry. I think some of my biggest allies and supporters have been male, which is fantastic. But it's going to be such a long journey because we're a long way off in having, it's much better than it was. This is the thing, I think, since I've started in the industry, there have been women around the place, and I think it's completely different to what it was like, even 10 years ago. So I feel very lucky in that respect that the women who went before me, if you like, probably had it much tougher than I have. But like I was saying, there's definitely days where I do feel like, oh gosh, am I going to be found out for not knowing what I'm talking about, or that kind of thing. But that's definitely in my own brain, and I think it's something a lot of women deal with, that sort of imposter syndrome feeling. But yeah, it's definitely a lot better than it was in terms of having women around, but still a lot of work to do.
It does seem like, from what I've seen at universities and things like that, that there are a lot more females coming through now.
Yeah, definitely. Just seeing, obviously I keep an eye on the course and who's on there, and how things are going, and it's always great, to see girls on the course. That there have been girls every single year, which is fantastic, and long may that continue, and hopefully there'll be more and more.
And advice can be a tricky thing, but would you have one key piece of advice for someone who's maybe a student looking to break into the industry, or someone maybe looking for a career change and looking to go into the industry?
Oh, advice is a tricky one because I'm still so early on. I feel like I'm winging every day as they go along. So I always get a bit nervous when people ask me for advice. I think you just have to have that drive, and like I've mentioned it earlier on in the podcast, going out there off your own back, looking for work experience. I mentioned all those Sunday afternoons unpaid that I spent in the rain filming Swans ladies against Abergavenny. It's not glamorous. It's fun, it is fun, but I didn't have to do those things, but I did, and they did pay off. So I think, yeah, just have that drive and be enthusiastic, and yeah, just get as much experience as you can. And for me, the earlier the better, just from my personal journey. That's not always the case, though. I think age is a funny thing. Some people feel like, oh gosh, if I haven't achieved this by a certain age, and then there's no point to me trying. That's absolutely not true. I know people that have changed their careers, gosh, well into their 40s, you know what I mean, just because they were unhappy. So yeah, it doesn't matter what age you are or at what point you are, it's never too late to be what you want to be or to achieve what you want to achieve. So yeah, that would be my advice. I've got loads of advice, but that would probably be the main one.
That's some great advice. And you mentioned earlier about reading a lot of books, some mainly about pep, but did you read any that helped you with work?
Do you know what? Did I? Probably not. No, I didn't read any media specific books. One book I did read, and this is going to sound so random, but there's a woman called Jen Atkin who is a celebrity hairstylist. Hear me out. She cuts, like, she does all the famous people, like she does their hair, like Beyonce, Kim Kardashian, like anyone who's anyone, Jen Atkin does their hair. But she's also a very successful businesswoman. Whenever I start to say this story, people are like, Shauna, do you want me to take life advice from the woman who cuts Kim Kardashian's hair? And I'm like, honestly, hear me out. Because in her book, she has a book, and I'd highly recommend it. It's probably geared more towards women, but anyone could read it, because she talks about her career, and oh my gosh, the advice she has is just fantastic. And even though it's not media related, I took so much advice from there. There was one bit where she talks about, she says, remember, it's never about you. And that really stuck with me, because she goes on to talk about how she deals with famous people every single day. And in this job, if you're lucky, you will deal with famous people like quite regularly. And I think in this day and age, it can be really easy to, or really tempting to, ask for the selfie, or, self-promote yourself and say, oh, look who I'm with. I'm with, so and so, and I'm interviewing this person today. And even though I'm a big advocate for self-promotion, and going back to the question about the show reel, it's definitely great to promote the work you do. There's sort of a time and a place. And if I'm ever interviewing someone, like for example, I did an interview with Ashley Williams a couple of weeks ago, which was a massive deal for me. I was his biggest fan when I was a teenager at Swansea. So it was, again, one of those moments where I just woke up with butterflies in my stomach, because my 15-year-old self would have just been so impressed. But it could have been I wasn't going to show up and stick a camera in his face and ask for a selfie. Like, that's just not appropriate. And the interview was all about him. I couldn't be there thinking, oh, this is going to look great on my Instagram, or oh, this is great for my career, blah blah blah. You can't think like that, because that's just not cool. Whoever you're interviewing, it has to be all about them, or it has to be all about the game, or it has to be all about the program that you're working on. I think there's no room for egos. I got a picture with Ashley, but at the end, you know what I mean? Like after the interview had finished, fair play, he stood there and chatted with us for about 20 minutes afterwards. So we were all relaxed. We were all having, chilling out. So that it was then appropriate then. So yeah, go back to your question about books. Highly recommend Jen Atkin's book. I promise you it's worth it. It's not as, people are probably thinking, what the hell is she on about? But I promise you, it's one of the best sort of career books that I think I've read.
And in terms of the Ashley Williams interview as well, it's just about being professional, isn't it? That basic concept.
Yeah, definitely. And like I alluded to earlier, it's there's a lot of sort of pinch me moments, in terms of when you meet someone that you've grown up admiring and all that. But yeah, it's just knowing how to, doesn't matter how excited you are or how in awe you are of them, you have to conduct yourself in a professional manner. And then going back to what I was saying about, at the end of the day, they're only human and they're only people. And I think if you can remember that and keep that in mind, then that will only do you a massive favor.
And then on social media as well, do you use that much as a platform?
Yes, I do, to be fair. I'm a big advocate for, we've mentioned sort of show reels and, self-promotion and, showing people what you can do. I'm a big fan of using your social media platforms for that reason. I don't really use them for personal reasons that much. For example, on Twitter, I'll never tweet about my friends or my family or, anything personal. I always just keep that for work. Similarly with Instagram as well. Instagram has changed sort of in the last year. I did put a bit of everything on there, but decided, right, no, I'll just stick to work stuff. Because I think it's a great way to show people what you can do. And I've had a lot of opportunities come my way just because someone follows me on Twitter or on Instagram. So yeah, again, going back, if any younger people are listening to this, I highly, highly, recommend that you keep your social medias clean and professional, and people probably hear this all the time, but yeah, because you just never know who's watching. You never know who's seeing your things. I remember early on, I think I was about 17 when I had a Twitter account, and I think I had that when I was about 15, and I was just I was probably tweeting about the X Factor and stuff. But I remember thinking, right, well, I'll delete this account and set up another one, and it will just be football, and that's all I'll tweet about. And that's the same Twitter account that I now have. So it's still going.
And it's doing pretty well in terms of followers as well.
Yeah, I mean, God, I don't really pay that much attention, to followers. I think you've got to be careful, because obviously the more followers you have, the more responsibility you have, and you can't just, you have to be careful about what you say. I think just try and be classy. Do you know what I mean? I'd never go on Twitter and bash someone, or complain, or anything like that. There's enough of that on social media already, so you don't want to bring even more negativity to the place.
It's been terrific to hear your story and advice, Sioned. Thanks very much for coming on.
No worries, Rich. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 6 of Rich's Sport Media Show. If you enjoyed, make sure to look out for the following episode. We're also on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook if you would like to follow for regular content.